I once proposed to an ex because I hoped that it would fix our broken and toxic relationship. It didn't. This is a video about why I and others stay in toxic relationships. Now, to define a toxic relationship, it's one where the dynamic harms the well-being of one or both of the people involved. And most people believe that if they were in a toxic relationship, that they would definitely leave. But here's what's crazy. What if I told you that 60% of couples admit to staying together too long? And it takes, on average, when people do spot that something is wrong in that relationship, around 6 years for couples to do something about it. And you can probably tell this was me as well. Another ex of mine once publicly abused me in front of her housemate, smashed my phone on the ground and made me walk 5 miles home in the cold and the dark without really knowing the way without a phone, all because I was 10 minutes late to pick her up from a gig. It took me another 2 years after that to finally cut off communication. Now, big disclaimer, I'm not demonizing anyone in this video or in any of my other content. Most of the time, these toxic relationships are a two-way responsibility, and I would say that in that moment, that's on me that I didn't cut off communication and walk away. This content and all my other content is about you, your agency, what you can do, and not about blaming anyone else. In fact, blaming other people is the reason why people stay stuck. And also, everyone's relationship is different, and the reasons why we might stay together are complex, right? They're impossible to understand. But you know what's crazy? Research shows that there are really only 5 reasons people stay in these types of relationships. The point of this video is if you know about these, then you're no longer trapped by them, and you can finally break free. In this video, we're going to go through those 5 reasons and give you some sort of signals and signs that this is what's happening for you or someone you know so that you can understand them and move on. Reason number 1, you might stay in a toxic relationship. You're hoping that person will change. We waste years in relationships hoping that people will change or go back to the person we thought they once were. We don't love that person, we love who we think they once were, or sometimes are, or what they could become. Think about times when you say, oh, but when it's good, it's really good, but actually, it's rarely ever good, is it? But here's what's crazy about that. This potential partner is just a malformed memory or a fantasy that we've created, and this version rarely ever will materialize. And you know what the worst part of that is? Your hope actually prevents the very change you're desperate to see. Your staying tells them that their behavior is acceptable, and it tells you that the unhappiness you're feeling is part of some growth process towards a goal that never come about. Now, this isn't just about wasted time, and we'll come back to wasted time later on. It's about the damage that's done to you whilst you're waiting for this change. Anxiety and depression can creep in when you're constantly disappointed by someone who never meets your expectations. And again, this happened to me. I went from being a happy person to medicated for both anxiety and depression and in therapy, all because I stayed too long in relationships that I shouldn't. Relationships need to be built with the person that's there today, not the version that you think or hope they might become tomorrow. Remember, as the great Maya Angelou once said, when people show you who they are, believe them the first time. Reason number 2, you might stay in a toxic relationship. You're afraid of being alone. Now, I was reading this longitudinal study that found those who fear being single are more likely to stay in unsatisfying or unhealthy relationships, pursue lower quality partners, avoid ending unhappy relationships, and actually be less selective during the dating process. Does this sound like you or someone you know? Well, the good news is you're not alone. Around 43% of people admit to staying in relationships where they are unhappy. And of course, I have my own story. I dated someone for a year during the pandemic primarily because I didn't want to be alone, even though I felt anxious and alone when I was with them. That's the point. That's the cruel irony of being in these types of relationships. You actually feel more alone when you're with that person than if you were on your own. Now, let's dig into why this is actually happening in our minds, because the fear of being single isn't just a preference, it's a psychological mechanism that hijacks your very decision-making. That fear of being alone tells you that you're unlovable or incomplete. And studies show that people with a high fear of being single experience intense anxiety at just the thought of not having a partner. Their brain starts sending signals that replicate the feeling of being in physical danger. So people like this, they stay put, they lower their standards to avoid this perceived threat of being alone. If this does sound like you, I want you to ask yourself, what version of your life are you postponing by staying? Reason number 3 why you might stay in a toxic relationship. You blame yourself for everything that goes wrong. A toxic relationship can sometimes feel like there's lots of unspoken rules, and one of the clearest indications of this is when you're being blamed for absolutely everything. And when this happens over and over again, you start to internalize that, and this is called a blame cycle. And here's what's so bad about blame cycles. You don't realize how deeply they've affected your mind until you're apologizing for things that haven't even happened. And the scariest part, well, this invisible damage often goes unnoticed for a long time by yourself and everyone around you. And in my experience, the mental toll of relationships lives longer in the body than anything else. Some examples from my own life: when an ex wasn't invited to a wedding because we were in a new relationship, that was my fault and I couldn't go. I didn't see my friends get married. When another ex refused to be intimate with me for months on end, it's because I somehow wasn't connecting to her, even though she couldn't explain or articulate what that meant or what I was doing wrong. When I felt insecure about close relationships with another ex and her exes, I was made to feel like a jealous fool simply for asking the question. So here's what nobody talks about. The people who blame others are usually the ones most afraid of taking responsibility, and they usually have no real answer for any questions that you might raise. And so what's truly heartbreaking about these situations is that many people suffer alone, convinced that they're too sensitive or imagining things, or that it really is their fault. And that's how I kind of felt. When I was talking to friends about these situations, I would make out that it really was something to do with me that was causing these issues and try to take the blame off my partners because I didn't want my friends to think that they were bad people. And when I finally did leave, it's not like the feeling of blame immediately disappeared. In fact, still today, I'll find myself overthinking messages that I send, my internet search history, and how I spend my free time, even though I'm in the best, most loving and safe relationship of my life. So how long does it take to unlearn believing you're the problem? Well, it definitely takes longer, the longer you stay. Reason number 4 why you might stay in a toxic relationship. You have a shared trauma, or there's a trauma that's happened in that relationship that you feel you need to stick around to fix. Once, an ex of mine threatened to take their own life when I tried to leave. Suddenly, I wasn't a partner anymore, I became something else entirely. And the wild part is, I'd already accepted that I deserved that punishment long before that moment, that this was the role I needed to fill. Because we'd been through some trauma earlier on in that relationship, and I'd felt like from that point forward, that I had to try and make up for that and fix that in her. I became less of a partner and more of a life support, constantly monitoring her emotional state while mine faded into the background. But here's a truth that took me years to learn. Staying in that role isn't actually going to help either of you. Sometimes the bravest love isn't about holding on, it's about letting go when the relationship has truly twisted into something that is hurting you both. The most painful part? These dynamics often feel intensely like love, that desperate need to help and fix that person, and the dramatic highs when things do improve momentarily. But real love does not ever demand any form of self-destruction. Because no one can be a good partner if they feel they deserve nothing for themselves. So what if the most loving thing you can do isn't staying, but walking away? Reason number 5 you might stay in a toxic relationship, the sunk cost fallacy. You've already lost years to a relationship that isn't working, but you're terrified to walk away because it feels like wasting an investment. Now that's the sunk cost fallacy messing with your head. Instead of asking, how long have we been together? Try asking, are we genuinely happy? Because your past investment cannot be recovered no matter what you do next. What matters is what you stand to gain by making a change. The ex that I mentioned at the top of the video, who I proposed to try and fix this toxic relationship that we had, well, that was just the last form of investment that I was putting in. We'd got a dog together, we'd moved in together, I'd bought a house for us to move into. But ultimately, I'd come to the end of the sunk cost fallacy, and I just knew that no more investment was going to save us, and it was time to end the relationship. But here's the crazy thing. Your mind actually works against you in these situations. You're hardwired to hate losing things that you already have, even if they're toxic, harmful, hurtful. The longer you stay in this dynamic, the longer you're creating a blueprint for accepting less than you deserve in every relationship, the current one and all the ones in the future. Breaking free means recognizing that your past time and effort isn't evidence of a good investment. Sometimes it's just the cost of learning a valuable lesson. The healthiest relationships do not need us to stay because of the past. They earn our presence every day because of the future that they promise. And here's the hidden reveal of everything. The one thing that ties all of the concepts in this video together is the cause and effect of all the toxic relationships that we've mentioned. It's self-worth. Ultimately, people with really strong self-worth do not put up with any of the things that I've mentioned in this video. But if you are someone that maybe feels like you've got low self-worth or self-esteem, like I have been, I want you to know that it takes time and action to build that back up. And sometimes that will mean faking it until you make it. Now, for me, that meant doing peer support, therapy, exercise, and sort of mimicking people who I perceived as having really good self-worth. And by the time I met my wife, I was ready to be healthy and happy. So today, ask yourself, does any of this sound like me? And if so, and you don't know where to go to do something about it, then drop me a comment or a message and let's get some informal peer support on the go. In the next video, I'm going to be talking more explicitly about how when you recognize these types of situations, you can remove yourself from them. But for today, thank you for being a cutie and being here at the right angle. I'll see you next time.